A very good morning to you, Mr. Xi Jinping, the President of China. The President of Russia, Vladimir Putin, a very good morning to you. And a very good morning to Mr. Joe Biden, the President of the United States. These individuals and a lot more want to visit Uganda, but we've been hearing some few contestations, some few bad stories about bomb attacks going off here and there. And we'd like to let you know that those are very, very small contestations. The Uganda police and other sister agencies are on top of that. If you are a tourist and you want to come to Uganda, please make your way to this country. There's a lot more you can explore. There is no terrorism that is taking center stage. The Uganda police that hasn't suffocated already, please make your way to Uganda. The issue at the airport, there was some issue or noise being made at the airport, some delays, but that was an online payment system that had broken down. Please make your way to this country. The vaccination is to ensure your safety so that you are protected when you make your way to this country. There is Rushaga Gorilla Camp in Bwindi, impenetrable forest that is waiting for you to visit it, and so that you can see the beauty within the Pearl of Africa. Also Bunyonyi Overland on Lake Bunyonyi in Kabale. That's another site that you can come and visit. Do not shy away from Uganda. Do not shy away from Africa. Come and visit and see the wonders that God birthed. And in that regard, let's go to Stephen Mbide. He's talking about the rights of journalists and how they could be protected. But before I do that, how do I even forget Inspire Africa coffee? Grab yourself a cup of this very, very magical cup that is riddled with a lot of good vibes that will go a long way in resuscitating your body's creative processes with just a sip of this Inspire Africa coffee. Very, very sweet. And also your lesson is that one app that you could use to actually continue with your learning. You're a student at home. Your parent is not there. There is no teacher. Fret not, you can actually maximize on the power of the internet using your lesson to actually learn on your own. Self-studying is the way to go. Stephen Mbide is bringing us a conversation largely talking about the welfare of the state of the journalists within this world. A very good morning, Mr. Mbide. What's the latest as far as journalists and their welfare is concerned?
Yes, good morning to you, Romeo Busiko. Indeed, this is the 2nd of November. It was a German philosopher called Martin Neuer who said that when they came for the Pharisees, I didn't speak out because I was not a Pharisee. When they came for the trade unionists, I didn't speak out because I wasn't one of them. And when they came for the socialists, I didn't also speak out. But when they came for me, there wasn't anyone to speak for me. This is something that we need to talk about because I am a journalist, and this day is known as the International Day to End Impunity for Crimes Against Journalists, where I also belong. We need to fight impunity. But what is impunity? Who are those that are the perpetrators of the crimes against journalists, the freedom of journalists? Let me speak to the experts. Today being the UNESCO Day that was declared as the 2nd November, the International Day to End Impunity for Crimes Against Journalists. On my left is Robert Sempala, the Executive Director for Human Rights Network for Journalists, but also on my right, he has been a journalist before, has practiced it on the ground, but also is now in advocacy. On my right is Dr. Emily Comfort Malakitho. She is the Director of Africa Policy Center at Uganda Christian University. Good morning to you, Doctor.
Good morning.
And thank you for speaking to us, and good morning to you, Robert.
Good morning, Stephen. Good to have you.
Yes, in my background, you can see the flags. This is an event that is organized by the European Union. Of course, we are also talking about ending impunity. Let's first define impunity. What is impunity?
Impunity is a state of failure to bring to account or cause accountability for those that commit crimes against journalists. The state of people walking away scot-free and justice is not served to the victims of the violations and the different abuses that are meted out to the journalists. Yeah, it is widely entrenched and it manifests in very different ways. One of them is failure to prosecute the perpetrators, those implicated. It also manifests through the different leaders, setting up the media against the community, like hate speech. They talk so negatively about the intentions, the work, and the positioning of the media in society, and that causes, the powers that be or the overzealous officers to grow wings and come to appreciate that they will not be brought to account even when they act out of the law. So in a nutshell, impunity is just failure by the powers that be to bring to account those that commit crimes against journalists.
Okay. Thank you, Robert. Doctor, when we talk about impunity, there is need to protect the journalists. But when you look at the statistics so far, this is just November, but according to UNESCO, 44 journalists have been killed, others have been imprisoned, and others have gotten injuries while on duty. While in 2020, statistics indicate that at least 65 were killed. There is need to protect the journalists. What needs to be done? Why are the journalists continuing year in, year out, continuing to be targets of acts against their freedom?
Thank you, Stephen. I hope I've remembered that correctly. First, I want to add to his definition of impunity. I like to think of impunity very briefly as getting away with murder. Like you do something, but you get away with it. You know that you will not be held accountable for it, or at least the system does not allow you to be accountable. And I think before I answer the question of what needs to be done, I think we need to understand why does impunity persist. And I think part of the reason impunity persists is the fact that our judicial system is often not strong enough to get people who have committed crimes against journalists to actually account. So even if you as a journalist got a problem and you took your case to the police and to the judicial system, it will take years before you can actually get justice. So the understanding the why is very, very important in order for us to know what exactly needs to be done. Now, in terms of what needs to be done, I think you cannot just pinpoint one thing that needs to be done, and definitely not just by one actor. We need to be in a place where so many actors are committed to ending impunity. What we see right now is that we don't have many actors speaking up. You started by talking about speaking up. Even journalists themselves often do not speak loud enough about ending impunity against crime that is committed against them. So for me, it's really getting to a place where all the actors, all the people who benefit from the news system, from the media system, actually get to demand for end of impunity against crimes that are committed against journalists. And that means that we are talking the government, we are talking the media themselves, we are talking media owners, journalists, we are talking trainers like ourselves. Because if the environment is not safe for journalists to go out there, whom are we going to train? People will be discouraged to come and get training as well. So I think besides having all these actors do something, we also must look at our policy system. What kind of regulatory and legal system do we have? Do they actually, encourage an end to impunity?
Okay.
If they do not, then we cannot perceive that impunity will end.
Thank you. Thank you, Doctor. Let me also turn again to Robert. Dr. Malakto here is highlighting a key issue. The journalists failing to come out and speak for themselves. Many times they are the front lines of covering news, but then they get entangled into a situation that endangers their lives. Why do they keep on failing to come out, speak? They always speak out for others. Why do they fail to come out and speak for themselves when they are in situations of danger?
Journalists are in a very precarious situation when it comes to their own issues because, those that commit crimes against them are mainly state agents. And the pattern of ownership of the media in this country is mainly by individuals who have confessed to either supporting the government, ruling party. Even when they are in business, they fear to, come close to being looked at in bad light, and so might lose, advertising revenue from government. But also, journalists are a bit known as united and a formidable force, to confront and take the bull on by its horns. But the most important and missing link in here is the ownership of the media houses. Journalists can only do so much because theirs is to fish for stories, come to the newsroom, and even when you say you're slapping a blackout, say on police activities, your editor or owner will say, I need that story, bring it in, because, behind there is a force that is, doing big business. So it is extremely tricky, and I think for only journalists' voices to be heard, they can be heard through the mainstream media development agencies and advocacy bodies, which do not run the media industry as a participating in on a day-to-day basis. It's not business for them. But if you're telling a single journalist to come and speak out, certainly you get a lot of pushing to get them in that position. But also, there's a lot of trying to divide the journalist fraternity in this country. Some are supposed to be good, like the good journalists, others are bad journalists, and there are those that have been blacklisted for speaking out, and that doesn't augur well with the rest who want to play safe.
Thank you. Doctor, turn to you again. The issue of professionalism, the journalists themselves, many act in a manner that you even question them and say, is he or she acting like a professional journalist? What should be done to increase the level of professionalism away from the training, but also because they deal with so many cases like corruption, you report about corruption, but then also you also find yourself in a situation that puts you in a tricky situation?
First of all, I have to say that the level of professionalism of journalists is no excuse for violation of their rights. In fact, I think that many journalists cannot do a good job because the environment within which they work does not support them. They do not have the tools with which to be professional. So if we are not providing journalists with the tools with which to be professional, if I have got training and I get into a media house and he's talking about ownership, having censorship around what the journalists can do and not do, then it will make no difference. So we must always think about how the protection of journalists is not dependent on the level of their professionalism. That is a different matter. There are many areas in our laws that deals with lack of professionalism, and we should allow that to actually take its course. It's part of also being accountable. It's part of holding the media accountable. When we are talking about protecting journalists, we are not saying the media should not be held accountable for its misbehavior. It can be held accountable, but the environment within which they should be able to provide service should be improved. What is the working condition of journalists? How are they being paid? Are they being given professional development programs? All kinds of things. If we are not dealing with that and we are expecting journalists to be professional, then we are not actually helping the matter. Ending impunity rests on the fact that something is going on and journalists are being persecuted, are being harassed, are being violated in terms of their rights, but nothing is being done about it. And that is what we need to deal with, what we need to do about ending that in particular.
Thank you.
In my view, it does not depend on their level of professionalism.
Thank you for that observation and clearance. But also, Robert, let's face it, year in, year out, there is commitment from, for example, security agencies of protecting the rights of journalists. But then time doesn't even fly when you see again things, events happening where they put lives of journalists in danger, but also they end up having injuries, others even being killed. The issue of commitment, how do we drive these actors to commit and then also respect the rights and freedoms of journalists? How do we drive them?
Yeah, I think this is a collective by all actors. There are so many different sector players that have to be brought onto the scene. Mainly is the leadership of the security agencies. Globally, it's mainly the security that is the worst perpetrator of violence against journalists. But in here, you have leaders who protect their very own. And say if it comes to the police, they're supposed to investigate crimes and prosecute, adduce evidence that can be used to prosecute the perpetrators, but they do not do that. And they hide under the cover of, certainly what we're talking about here, impunity, because they know nothing will happen to them. But also taking these partisan sides. You find a security guy who is set up against a journalist, not because they're committing any crimes, but because they're covering, say, the political opposition. And as such, we need to also raise awareness within the security circles. We need to raise their levels of professionalism with themselves, but we importantly need to invite the political leadership of this country, to have good commitment and support for the journalists. That will help us end impunity.
Thank you so much. Your last 30 seconds, your last word to the journalists, but also to the actors who are supposed to defend the rights of journalists against impunity, against crimes, against journalists.
We are not laboring in vain. All of us must just be re-energized. The fact that we do not have journalists in cells today, not one killed in the line of duty, at least in my own country, even during elections, though others were shot at. So we should only become more united and concretize ourselves into that critical force that is equal to the task of protecting journalists, because it's a vehicle for human rights, democratization, rule of law, and a lot. So the media should be protected, and also impunity should be, fought.
Okay. 30 seconds, Doctor. Also, your last words to the journalists themselves, but also the actors who are supposed to defend the rights of journalists and also try to end impunity.
Yeah, for the journalists, I think they must be encouraged not to give up, to do professional work, to be professional. There's no excuse, like I said, for not giving them space to work. But journalists must also earn the credibility of the public and earn the public trust so that they can be protected, not just by the state, but also by their communities, by their trust that actually consider their work important. If journalists are not going to earn the trust of these various actors, protecting them will be a very difficult job. But in order to end impunity, I think we must think more broadly about the judicial system and strengthening it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Emily Comfort Marakitho. She is a lecturer. Of course, she has trained so many journalists who are in the field, and of course she's also the director Africa Policy Center at the Uganda Christian University. Been with also here with Robert Sempala, a journalist by all standards, but also he is the executive director for Human Rights Network for Journalists. This is Stephen Imbido and Professor Chibuga, and of course here we are at Hotel Africana, where there is a breakfast meeting that is also trying to see that we end impunity, and this is part of the International Day to End Impunity for Crimes Against Journalists. Thank you so much for watching Morning at NTV. I have now turned you back to Romeo Busiku, who is there in the studios.
A very good morning.